And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Moscow Photographer channel and tonight's podcast with our special guest. Today's guest is none other than Constantin von Hoffmeister. He is the founder and director of Multipolar Press. He has studied English literature and political science in the United States, in New Orleans, and he has worked as an author, a journalist, translator, editor, and business trainer in the United States, India, Uzbekistan, and Russia. Constantine is also the author of 3 books, Esoteric Trumpism, Multipolarity, and Multipolar Galaxy, and Star Wars as a Myth of Civilization, Star Wars as a Myth of Civilizational Rebirth. Wow, that's a tongue twister. Constantine, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. My pleasure. In fact, ever since we've met here in Moscow, I've been wanting to do a podcast interview with you because you have so much to say about what's going on in the world today, not only from a geopolitical perspective, but also just so much knowledge that I find it's such a pleasure to always speak with you. And so it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you.
So, one of your books that you've written that we talked about is about multipolarity, and so much focus is on multipolarity, but tonight I wanted to talk about unipolarity and the chaos that multipolarity seems to be happening. I mean, it's just falling apart in the West. And that unique perspective that you have matters because the unipolar system that followed the Cold War is clearly under some sort of strain. And inside the United States, we're seeing deep fractures, not only in the political sphere, political polarization, but there's declining trust in government institutions, just declining trust in the economy, breakdowns in law and order, and even fragmentation of shared moral and religious frameworks. And that's very important because those are one of the things that held the United States together. And at the same time, U.S. foreign policy appears to be shifting, especially under Donald Trump. Longstanding Western alliances are increasingly coming into question, especially with those having to deal with the European Union and what's happening in Europe. So while America's attention turns inward toward America's own hemisphere in places like Venezuela, and there's a lot of sharp rhetoric around Greenland, with that setting the stage, Constantine, from your perspective, is what we're seeing today simply a moment of American decline, or does unipolarity itself contain the seeds of this kind of fragmentation?
Well, I think it's both, as a matter of fact. Well, I would just like to summarize what led us to this point. So after 1945, after the Second World War, you had the bipolar world because you have the 2 great victors of the Second World War. You have the United States and you have the Soviet Union. And you had the United States with its sphere of influence and its satellites, like the NATO states, Western Europe, Australia, etc. And you have the Soviet Union with the Warsaw Pact and its satellite states, Eastern Europe, Central Europe. And these 2 poles pretty much divided the world into 2. That's why it's the bipolar system. Then at the beginning of the 90s, with a breakup of the Soviet Union, one of these poles collapsed. And we only had one pole left, which was the United States. And the United States then was not merely a superpower, it was actually a hyperpower because it was the only power that mattered on the entire globe. So we entered the unipolar world in the early 1990s, where the United States could basically act with impunity. And it did so. But at the same
It did.
time, it did. But at the same time, the United States at least pretended that they were following some sort of quote unquote international law or some sort of like global norms, some, I don't know, some made up value system. So they didn't reject the notion of international law. They pretended to actually adhere to it and even try to justify the various, I don't know, violations of other countries' sovereignties by appealing to the United Nations, for example, before they invaded Afghanistan, for example. And now I think the unipolar era is coming to an end because we have other strong actors now on the global stage, namely the Russian Federation, China, and India. So now we have four poles in the multipolar world, because what is the definition of a pole? A pole is a civilization state, which means it is a culture, it is a civilization where the people sort of share a common heritage. They speak the same language, they more or less follow the same traditions. So that's a civilization. But a pole also has to be a state, which means it has to be sovereign. It has to be a sovereign political entity. And to be sovereign, you need nuclear weapons, right? As a defensive measure, obviously. So these four states are the four poles in the multipolar world now. So it's India, United States, Russia, and China. Like, for example, the Islamic world is clearly, it's a civilization. Because they all share the same culture, Quran, Muhammad, the same belief, same religion, same rites, same rituals. But it is not a unified state. It is totally fragmented. They have these like small states that are sometimes at odds with each other, sometimes supporting Israel, sometimes not supporting Israel. So it's not unified. It's not a civilization state. It is just a civilization that therefore it doesn't count as a pole. So now we have these different poles, I mean, in competition with each other. And that's why I call it not just multipolarity, but Darwinian multipolarity. Because now that international law has basically ceased to exist, we now have the law of might is right, the evolutionary law, which has always been in effect anyway. I mean, might is right has always been the game. It had in the past, it had just been masked with like rhetoric of sort of like international norms, values, transatlantic alliance, and all the other claptrap, so to speak. So now the propaganda mask has fallen off the face of the United States when Trump basically announced that he doesn't give a shit about international law. Like, what is international law? He said he basically implied that international law as a concept was some sort of globalist conspiracy to block the United States from expanding and developing according to its might, basically. And, you know, he's right in some way, because now that the United States is now, basically the United States is now acting with total impunity, right? I mean, it just kidnaps sitting presidents like Venezuela. I mean, that's the Monroe Doctrine.
Absolutely.
I'm not criticizing it. I'm not like I don't know, some leftist communist or anti-imperialist, because this is how the real world works, obviously. I mean, powerful countries have spheres of interests, and weaker countries either have to find a big partner that can protect them, or they have to submit to the bigger state, right? I mean, that's how it works. Not just in the real world on the global stage. That's how it works in like the high school, in high school, like in the lunch break,
in the hallways.
Yeah, in the hallways, you need like some guy to protect you if you're like a small wimp. Yes. Otherwise, you get beaten up, or they, I don't know, what do they do? They put you in the lockers, whatever. Anyway, so I mean, that's how it works on the global stage as well. This is human nature. You always have the alpha male, and leading the pack, basically. So what the United States is doing in its own hemisphere, I mean, it's completely understandable. It's neither good nor bad. It just is, basically. Now, but the United States, the problem is that the United States is not limiting itself to the Western Hemisphere, because if it was limiting itself to its own sphere of influence, meaning the Western Hemisphere, North and South America, basically, I mean, there wouldn't really be a problem. The problem is that the United States is still considers the entire globe its sphere of influence, basically, and that's where now we have the clash between the dying unipolar world and the emerging multipolar world. Like, for example, the attack on Iran and the new attack on Iran that is surely forthcoming. I mean, this is not in America's sphere of influence. Iran, how is it? It's not, obviously, right? I mean, that's because it is subservient to Israel's interests, which is a whole other topic, obviously. And, well, Greenland, the argument could be made. I mean, it really belongs to the American continent, and it is in America's sphere of influence. But somehow, Trump seems to have backed down on his claim on Greenland, which is, in my opinion, very disappointing, because I was actually all in favor of the United States taking Greenland. Because if the United States had taken Greenland, or I don't know, would take Greenland, then it would surely destroy NATO. Yes, because how can you have Article 5? How can you invoke Article 5 if a NATO country attacks another NATO country? Meaning the United States attacking Denmark and seizing some of Denmark's territory. Like, how would that work? Then the NATO countries would have to ask the United States to protect them against the United States, right? I mean, I mean, if NATO continues to exist after the United States attacks Greenland, then NATO would just be a parody of its former self. Really, it wouldn't really work. So, I mean, in my opinion, that's a very good thing, because NATO is basically a criminal organization. So the destruction of NATO would have been...
It runs amok.
Yeah, it would have been a net positive, right? I mean, Denmark was one of the very first countries that acknowledged the sovereignty of Kosovo. You know, I mean, who are they to complain if America wants to do the same to them? It's like what goes around comes around, I suppose. You know what I mean? So now the problem is we have the clash, right? Because you have other powers like Russia, for example, and Russia, for several reasons, still constantly talks about international law, United Nations, and violation of international law. Like just recently, when the United States seized a tanker flying a Russian flag, Russia did not respond tit for tat. They didn't seize an American tanker, as they should, in my opinion, but they didn't. So instead, they just complained. I said, well, it's a violation of international maritime law. Yes, but nobody cares about this anymore. I mean, definitely not the United States. I mean, Trump has openly said so. So this is why we live in this new world. And I think these actors, like Russia and China, I think they have to slowly wake up to the fact that they also have to play, basically, with the same methods that the United States is playing with. Otherwise, they will just be overwhelmed. They will go under, basically. So they will have to become more brazen as well, in my opinion. And like when Trump talks about deals, for example, he wants to make deals. I mean, like, who makes deals? Like, really, like just a phrase, let's make a deal. I mean, it's like a gangster phrase. Yes, and I mean, you don't make deals with the mafia. And I mean, it's not even possible to make any deals, I mean, long-term deals with the United States, because, and I think the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, he also said that the United States is inherently agreement incapable. Like, you cannot make an agreement with the United States. So when, like, in his first term, when Trump went and met the North Korean leader, and he basically wanted to make a deal with the North Korean leader. So he wanted the North Korean leader to give up nuclear weapons in exchange for all kinds of concessions that the United States was willing to make. But then, of course, I mean, North Korea would be crazy to do this, because if you give up your nuclear weapons, then you are invaded and you're colonized. I mean, look at what happened to Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi. I mean, it's a prime example. So I don't blame countries for wanting to keep the nuclear weapons, or even to acquire, or even to acquire ones if the countries don't have nuclear weapons. So I mean, it's not possible. And the reason why it's not possible to make a deal on agreement with the United States, I think it's because the United States has an inherently bipolar, and I mean this in a clinical sense, political system. Yes, because you have this term, first you have these term limits. I mean, 8 years maximum for president, and each term is 4 years. So I mean, now we have Trump with MAGA. I mean, it has a lot of positive aspects because of the destruction of wokeism and the return to more traditional American values, and just the sheer honesty, like changing the name of Ministry of Defense to Ministry of War, for example. It's also very good, in my opinion. So the reason you can't make an agreement with the US is because you only have this administration for 4 years. After 4 years, you might get a Democrat in power, and he might have completely different priorities. So America cannot have a long-term strategy. I mean, the strategy is always maximum 4 years till the end of a term, because nobody knows what will happen after these 4 years. And sometimes the two administrations are completely at odds with each other. Like Trump keeps talking about the conflict in Ukraine. He calls it Biden's war, right? As if it was not America's war, as if it was just Biden's war, have nothing to do with it. Yes, it's totally grotesque if you think about it, because it is America's war. America is technically at war with the Russian Federation. And Ukraine, of course, it's a proxy war. And it's been at war with the Russian Federation for years. Whether it's Trump or Biden, it doesn't matter. But for some reason, this is like this weird mentality you have where like one administration just pretends it's like a completely different country, and the administration that came before is like some foreign entity that had nothing to do with it. It's completely bizarre if you think about it. I think,
well, you know, no, it just brings up the point that externally the United States works as a unipolar hegemony, but internally, politically, it's the uniparty as well, as you said, because it doesn't matter whether each politician has a D or an R after their name. It's the same politics.
Yeah, well, it is because the people behind the president are the same, but on the other hand, there are some differences, right? Because like Obama made a deal or made an agreement with Iran, and then Biden or Obama made a deal with Iran, then Trump came to power and he just ripped it up. He said, no, I don't like it, so forget about it. The agreement is null and void. So how can any country trust the United States to enter into an agreement if at a future point another administration will just completely ignore it and change it? Because there's no long-term guarantee. And I think, and this is a foreign politics, yes, of the United States. But I think even domestically, the system, this term system, has major drawbacks. Like you cannot make any like long-term infrastructure planning. You cannot focus on a major infrastructure project, because some of them take 10, 20, 30 years. But I think no president would commit to a major infrastructure project that would last way beyond his second term, because that would mean, I mean, this president like Trump would start some infrastructure project, and then 20 years later, maybe a Democrat president would earn all the laurels and the praise once the project is finished, because nobody would remember that it was Trump that started it. Yes, I think this is one of the reasons, like in the United States, it's always the problem with modernizing the infrastructure, because the administrations are basically reluctant to do so because they cannot earn the fruits of the investment, because the future administration might. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that brings up this question, and that is, how much of the stress on unipolarity and this disintegration of unipolarity that we see happening, how much is that due to external stress from other nations, like, for instance, the BRICS nations, and how much of it is due just to internal strife within the United States, because we have an electorate we're extremely polarized on both sides, and nobody trusts the government. Nobody trusts politicians, and I'm even wondering if Donald Trump can even survive politically. I mean, till the end of his term. So how much of that is due to internal stress and external stresses, or are they both working in conjunction at this particular moment in time in history to do away with unipolarity?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. Well, external factors are various conflicts that are now going on all over the world, like the Ukraine conflict, for example. I mean, I think the United States, and at that time, the collective West, because it was like United States, together with the European Union, that started this conflict against the Russian Federation. I think they thought that they could probably end this conflict very quickly, and that they could weaken Russia by putting the sanctions on Russia. Like they were probably hoping to economically ruin Russia. But now we see that the opposite has happened. Yes, I mean, Russia has not been severely weakened by the sanctions. I think to some extent it has even been strengthened by the sanctions, because it was basically forced to become more independent and self-reliant and autarkic. And it has really boosted Russian agriculture, for example, also Russian industry, because they have to make a lot of stuff on their own because they can't import them anymore. So this has been a really, really positive effect on Russia, also in terms of culture, because I mean, you don't have this this flood of Hollywood movies in Russian cinemas anymore. Because I was in Moscow a couple of weeks ago, and I was just walking around in a mall there, and walked past like a big movie theater, and pretty much every single movie that was playing was a Russian movie, like no Hollywood movies anymore. It is also quite marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, I mean, these are really, really positive developments. And so the sanctions have backfired, especially on the European Union. Yes, so the European Union has been seriously weakened by the sanctions, especially Germany, because Germany is not getting any Russian energy anymore, because it refuses Russian energy, doesn't want it. Yes, so instead it wants to pay more money to get energy elsewhere. At the same time, because of the climate hysteria, because of the Greens like dominating the political landscape in Germany, they shut down their nuclear power plants almost at the same time. So thereby crippling German industry. And I guess it's very similar in other Western European countries, mostly because of the lack of cheap energy is really hurting the industrial base of the continent. I mean, you have Viktor Orban, for example, and I mean, the Hungary's leader, and he got an exception from the Trump administration to be exempt from the sanctions, and he's now getting like Russian energy for the benefit of the Hungarian people. And of course, a lot of people in the West, especially Western Europe, accuse Orban of being a Russian stooge, you know, like working for the Kremlin. But in reality, he's not. I don't think he's necessarily even pro-Russian or anti-Russian. I think he's just pro-Hungarian. He just wants what is good for the Hungarian people. And cheap energy is definitely good for the Hungarian economy. And therefore, it's also good for the Hungarian people. And not making the world's largest country with the largest nuclear arsenal your enemy is also a positive thing, in my opinion. Now, the conflict in Ukraine, I think, could have been ended, I mean, years ago, because in March of 2022, like a month after the conflict broke out, they already had negotiations, like the Ukrainians and the Russians. And of course, the Ukrainians, I mean, are really just puppets of the West, obviously. I think they could have settled the matter back then with just giving up, I don't know, Donbass, basically. And that
Make
would
it
have
territorial concessions.
ended,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like territorial concessions. And I think that would have settled the matter. But then I think Boris Johnson from Britain, he like urged the Ukrainians, no, don't give in to the Russian demands, you know, just continue fighting, we'll support you. Yes. So I think the Europeans are now artificially and unnecessarily prolonging the war, causing more deaths, more destruction, but the result will be exactly the same or possibly even worse, because the fact is that Russia will win this conflict. It is not a matter of if Russia will win, it's just when. Yes, it will just be drawn out. Yes, and it's and you know, it's like World War One basically, right? It's like a war of attrition now, and everything is happening very slowly. And I think the reason why it's happening so slowly is because Russia is advancing very slowly because they want to minimize civilian casualties. I mean, this is in opposition to what the Western media always claims, because the Western media hysterically and falsely accuses Russia of committing quote unquote genocide. Yes, this is laughable and totally ridiculous. It's the complete opposite of what Russia's doing. Yes, of course, there's always collateral damage. I mean, there are civilian casualties on both sides, but Russia is really trying to minimize these civilian casualties and never target civilians on purpose, obviously. Yes, I mean, who's really committing genocide? And it's Israel in the Middle East. I mean, if you look at the pictures of Gaza, I mean, when was the last time you saw pictures of an urban area like looking like the moon, basically, like craters? But it's unthinkable. Mm-hmm. And the West has said nothing about this, absolutely nothing, completely silent. Well, the United States has traditionally been working for Israel's interests, but even the Western Europeans, they're completely silent, you know, like maybe some mild, very mild criticism here and there, a few words, but nothing really substantial. So there's no criticism, basically, or condemnation of Israel's actions in Gaza. So the double standard is so glaring that it should really blind people. And I think especially the global South is noticing it now, the double standard. And I think this is what also weakens the West's status in the world, because nobody believes the West anymore, because they think, well, you're supporting what Israel is doing to the civilians in Gaza, and you say nothing, and at the same time, you complain when other countries do something that is not nearly comparable to what Israel is doing. It's purely political, obviously. And a lot of people have noticed the sanctions, by the way, because it also hurt the United States and is going to lead to more de-dollarization, because by putting sanctions on Russia or by freezing Russian assets in the United States and Western Europe, a lot of countries, again, in the global South or all over the world, I mean, they look at this and they think, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to invest or to keep our money in the West, because it seems like once you disagree with the West, they will just steal your money, basically. I mean, because this is what the West is doing. So, and that is also the reason why so many countries now, like Russia and China, when they deal with each other, the businesses, they deal in local currencies. They don't want to deal with the dollar anymore. So the process of de-dollarization is gaining pace, so to speak. And interestingly enough, because as you mentioned earlier, I mean, Trump, he's an American imperialist, clearly, and he wants to keep, desperately wants to keep America's status as the global hegemon, yes. But I think he's achieving the opposite. He's like Mephistopheles from Goethe's Faust, the famous German play, because people said about Mephistopheles that he's the person that always wants to do evil, but in the end always does good. Yes, and this is exactly, in my opinion, what is happening with the United States under the Trump administration, because Donald Trump is doing all these like unilateral actions, flouting international law, kidnapping presidents, invading sovereign countries left and right, not even pretending it's about democracy, but basically saying it's about the oil and because we want the territory, which is fine. I mean, I'm nothing against it. It's honest, it's normal for an imperial power, yes. But it weakens America because a lot of people are moving away from the global system, especially financial system that America has built. And if too many powerful actors move away from this financial infrastructure, which was constructed by the United States over decades, it will totally ruin the American economy. And it will happen. I mean, just look at the value of gold. It has exploded because so many people are buying gold and not dollars anymore. So it will happen 100%. And this will weaken the United States. And all of this, in my opinion, is very positive. And I'm saying this not because I'm anti-American, because I'm not anti-American at all. I'm totally pro-American. I lived in America 12 years. I'm a big fan of the US. I have lots of friends there, studied, went to university in America. Big fan of American writers. Edgar Allan Poe, put flowers on his grave. H.P. Lovecraft, the same. So used to participate in Civil War reenactments in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, etc. So big fan of the U.S. But I've been saying this for decades. The average American does not benefit from the needless imperialism of the American elite. I mean, there's nothing wrong with imperialism per se, but it's this imperialism that is just I would say naked greed, where only the people at the very, very top really benefit from it. And the populace is just brainwashed into believing that these wars are somehow necessary. Like when they, I don't know, when they honor the fallen soldiers, which I absolutely respect, of course, but they keep saying, well, they died defending our freedom. Well, it is obviously not true. Yes, I mean, I'm sorry, it's not true. Like the soldiers that died in Iraq or Afghanistan, they didn't die defending America's freedom, because Iraq or Afghanistan, they never threatened America's freedom. Like how were they ever a threat to the United States? They were a threat to Israel, maybe. Yes, possibly. Yes, but maybe not even that. So, I mean, it was purely for oil and for the weapons manufacturers. Yes, I mean, these people benefited from it. So, I mean, if the age of this kind of imperialism ends and America still remains the most powerful actor in the Western Hemisphere, but actually sticks to its own hemisphere, then the world will be a better place. And I think the average American will definitely benefit from it, because trillions of dollars were wasted on a 20-year occupation of Afghanistan to basically, well, they spent trillions of dollars to oust the Taliban, and they left with the Taliban in power. Like, what the hell is this? Yes, right? So, I mean...
Yes, and of course, Trump blames that on Biden and that particular exit.
Right. Like, if I'd been president, it wouldn't have been like this. Yeah, right, whatever. It's America's problem, really, if you think about it. I mean, China doesn't do this, and you see these videos on X or people who've been to China that tell you about it. You know what China looks like? It's like the future. It's like a science fiction movie, because they invest all their money in infrastructure that benefits its citizens, as opposed to wasting money on wars that only a tiny elite benefits from.
Mm-hmm. You know, and that brings up this question. That's about, you know, the U.S. came out with its new national security strategy, which is now in place, which clearly focuses more heavily on its own hemisphere, and instead of its traditional allies in the Five Eyes and in Europe. So could this be understood as a form of like regional hegemony, or is it like simply policing its own backyard?
I think it's policing its own backyard and regional hegemony at the same time. Yes, I mean, now you have basically the West has fractured, because now you have several different Wests. I mean, the West used to be a unified pole because it had common interests, and I think President Biden, like, he desperately tried to save the West as a unified collective entity, and to some extent he succeeded. Yes, but Trump totally broke this, because now America is pretty much divorced from Western Europe, because, I mean, Trump realized, and in my opinion rightfully so, that America should not keep financing the Europeans' defense, because why should it? Because, I mean, America has, I know, tons and tons of military bases in Western Europe, and hundreds and thousands of soldiers stationed there, all at the expense of American taxpayers, but for the benefit of the Western Europeans. And now, of course, Trump feels quite uncomfortable keeping up this system of basically America being exploited by the Europeans. And it definitely wants to change it. And the Europeans are absolutely in panic about this because they don't know what to do, because they don't have a real standing army. I mean, France has nuclear weapons, and France is probably the only country in the European Union that is sort of semi-sovereign. I mean, Germany has been occupied since 1945 and it's an American vassal state. I mean, the Americans blew up Nord Stream 2. The Germans probably knew about it, and they did nothing to prevent it or didn't even complain about it. And also what Germany did to its industry was all for the benefit of the American economy and obviously not the European economy. So that's why, in my opinion, Western Europe is now a sort of separate West from the American West. It's basically West 1, West 2, yes? And also...
But it's a weaker West, yes?
Yeah, it's a much weaker, it's an irrelevant West almost, yes? I mean, because the Trump administration and Trump presidency, they're I mean, with all their faults, there are also a lot of positive aspects because they're very anti-globalist, which is a very, very good thing. I mean, they just recently, a few days ago, they left WHO, the World Health Organization, yes, which is yes. They left a lot of UN organizations, which is all wonderful because the UN is as useless as the term in the national law. I mean, it serves no purpose. It's just like a chatterbox, but it resolves absolutely nothing. And I think the United States realized this because, I mean, the new doctrine, and it's the official doctrine in the national security strategy of the United States, it's basically what is good for the US should be pursued, no matter the consequences for other nations or states. I mean, this is national policy now in the United States. So it's unashamed here. Yes.
And it seems to leave room also for other countries to have and maintain their own national interests. So what's good for Russia should be good for Russia. That should be Russia first. You mentioned Viktor Orban from Hungary, who's definitely working for the interests of the Hungarian people. And this is what a leader is supposed to do. But my question is, how much is Trump actually trying to pull away from hegemony, or is it just his actions that are creating it, that are hastening the demise of it?
Well, he's not. Well, he's trying to maintain the hegemony, and as you correctly stated, his actions are doing the opposite, obviously. Yes, they have the opposite effect of what he's trying to achieve. That's why I compared him to Mephistopheles from Faust. And basically now in the world, instead of rule of law, you now have rule of precedent. Yes, for example, the United States kidnaps Maduro, a sitting president, like a completely sovereign nation, did not threaten the United States in any shape or form. I mean, this whole thing about drugs, I mean, it's like Colin Powell and WMDs, right? I mean, it's made up, right? I mean, of course, there were drugs, but that was not really the issue, and everybody knows it. But that's not the point. So, but now America, by kidnapping Maduro, basically occupying Venezuela, it set a precedent, yes, because other countries will say, like China, for example, with Taiwan, they will say, well, if America does something like this, why can't we? Yes, and who's going to complain? And this is the precedent that Trump's actions are setting on the global stage. And that's a positive thing because it will lead, as you said, to other powerful states like Russia and China to do similar things in their spheres of influence. Well, like Russia and Ukraine, because Ukraine is in Russia's sphere of influence, obviously. Like America would have never tolerated, I don't know, Mexico being supported by Russia and China and having bases there. I mean, you almost had World War III because of Russian missiles in Cuba, right? So why should the Russians tolerate it? Of course they shouldn't. Yes, like why should the Chinese tolerate one part of their country split off from the mainland, Taiwan? Yes, and they will not tolerate it in the long run. They will take it back. Yes, and then America can hardly say, well, you can't do that because Taiwan is a sovereign nation. Because, well, it's not a sovereign nation; it's an integral part of China. But even if they use an argument like this, it will ring hollow because of the precedent rule, because of rule of precedent. They will just say, well, America, who are you to complain? I mean, you're the one that kidnapped the sitting president, right? You're the one that
you set the precedent.
How did Iran threaten the United States ever? Right? Never.
Exactly.
Yes. Or Afghanistan. Sorry.
And Trump early on in his administration, he was extremely critical of BRICS, and he stated on more than one occasion that BRICS, that the sole purpose of BRICS was to de-dollarize and to create its own currency. But yet, lately, especially with the new national security strategy, which seems to soften some of that rhetoric, he seems that, at least I get a sense, that he wants to pivot away from Western Europe and Brussels, and maybe pivot more toward Russia and the global South. What say you about that?
Absolutely, I completely agree, and I think he's right to do so because Europe has nothing to offer anymore. I mean, there's no dynamism, there's no real innovation, there's no real development going on in Europe anymore. I mean, it's a dying continent. It's on its way out. I mean, Europe will continue to exist. It will just be an irrelevant backwater. I mean, it's like a new Mongolia, yes, because remember Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire, yes, the most powerful, most expansive empire of its time. And look at Mongolia now. It's literally nothing, yes? And I think Western Europe is heading down the same path. It was once relevant, and it's becoming less and less relevant. Of course, the United States is still a dynamic and, a power full of vitality. And I think it sees that Russia is still also a young, developing nation. China massively developing, India developing. I mean, this is where the focus is now. It's East, yes? And it's the same with Russia, by the way. I mean, Russia always wanted to have a good relationship with Europe, Western Europe, but was always rebuffed by Western Europe. So now Russia entered into an alliance with China, naturally so, and I hope they continue. So it is just a natural process, in my opinion, because of the cyclical nature of cultures and civilizations, which goes to Oswald Spengler, the German historical philosopher of the 1920s. He wrote a book called The Decline of the West, in which he basically stated that each culture is like an organism. Yes, it is born, it grows up, it matures, it grows old, then it withers, and then it dies. And he said that the West is already in the dying stage. Yes, it's like an old man, like a 90-year-old man. It's a sick old man of the world, the West. And I don't believe that the West can be reformed. I don't think it can experience renaissance. It cannot go back. Yes, because a 90-year-old man might want to be 16 years old again. He might pretend he's 16 years old, but he's not 16 years old. He can't do things a 16-year-old can do. Obviously, there are physical limitations. And it's the same with Europe. It's an old man, it cannot go back. It will have to die, and that's all there's to it. And something else will come and will replace it, another organism. We don't know what it is yet. It will be, in my opinion, will be the new people. It will be a sort of fusion, right? So the West will die, then like the Roman Empire died, and after the fall of the Roman Empire, you had like the Venetian Republic, which lasted almost 1,000 years. So after the fall of the West, a lot of people, I mean, ethnic Europeans and non-Europeans, because of the massive amount of immigrants that are in Western Europe, they will somehow band together and will form a new entity, which will not be a continuation of the West. It will be something new. It might take elements from the West, but it will also take elements from the immigrants' background, I think, and it will create a sort of synthesis. I think this is what will come in Western Europe, and this future is not so far off, in my opinion. So yeah, so Europe is not a pole in the multipolar world. It is basically becoming a global backwater, yes, and that's why the United States has interest in Western Europe. I mean, they say they have the rhetoric like J.D. Vance when he says that, yeah, we care about Western civilization because, I mean, America was founded on Western values like Greece, Rome, which is true, of course, yes, obviously. And we want to help save Western civilization. But I don't think it's possible because, I mean, America itself is dying as a Western state, yes. And it's also turning into something else because the genetic base is just vanishing.
Well, that leads me into as we move forward to close this conversation. The central question is, and I think you alluded to it there, is what America is in its demise, as you alluded to, but how will it continue? Will it exist in some sort of like fragmented hegemony, or will it just abandon unipolarity and maybe someday join BRICS and the multipolar world?
Well, I'm not sure if it's going to join BRICS, but and I will definitely join the multipolar world, whether it wants to or not. I mean, it will just become a part of the multipolar world. Because what is the multipolar world? The multipolar world is a world where you don't have just one hegemon, you don't have just one global hegemon, but you have several regional hegemons. Yes. So the United States will just cease being the global hegemon, and it will become a regional hegemon in the Western Hemisphere, for real this time. And then you have other hegemons, of course. And I think this will be the setup of the coming world. I mean, we're already in this world. It's already being formed as we speak. Yes, so it's not like some future fantasy. We are already living it. And yeah, I don't think the United States is like going to crash and burn anytime soon. I think it will continue to exist possibly for quite a long time because it still has, like I said, a lot of energy and a lot of power. And some people argue that it's also still a very young country as opposed to the old man that Western Europe is basically. So I think the United States still has a lot of potential, but of course it will change drastically, well, mostly due to the ethnic makeup that is being completely mixed up basically in the United States, as you know, with a low birth rate of white Americans and the flooding of non-white immigrants, which will continue unabated, in my opinion. The same in Western Europe. And the EU just signed the deal with India, where they basically said we will now import millions and hundreds of millions of Indians into Europe as teachers. I mean, students and engineers, workers. And the Indians will come, for sure. I mean, some Europeans will go to India, but very, very few. I think it will mostly be one-sided. So, I mean, some people on the right, they argue it's like the camp of the saints in real life. Well, maybe, but I know I'm not a pessimist. It's just the way it is because everything is always in flux. Nothing stays the same.
Well, Constantin, wow, thank you so much for joining us and for helping frame these questions beyond the limits of the daily news cycle. And we could sit here and just have a conversation for hours. And we've touched on so many very good topics that we'll definitely have to have another live stream and discuss and go deeper into some of these other topics. But before we go, can you please let our audience know where they can find you on social media? I understand you have a Substack as well.
Yeah, well, I have two Substacks, actually. I have one called eurosiberia.net, on which I publish only my own writings, like 1 or 2 articles per week about philosophy, history, culture, and various other topics that tickle my fancy. So check it out. Then I have a publishing company called Multipolar Press, which publishes books. The first book was published last week. It's Multipolar Galaxy, Star Wars as a Myth of Civilizational Rebirth. It is actually written by me, my third book, but the first book published by my own publishing house, Multipolar Press. And we're planning to publish a lot of books by a variety of authors from all over the world in the near future. I will keep you updated. Well, I'm definitely on X, you know, Constantin von Hoffmeister. You can find me on Multipolar Press, Constantin von Hoffmeister. At Constantin, hold on, I don't even know. Let me just check real quick what my profile even says.
We'll have all of your links also in the description.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's at Constantin von H on X, and also I have multipolarpress.com, which is another Substack on which I publish writings by different authors related to the topic of multipolarity from a cultural, historical, philosophical, and literary perspective. We publish, for example, Alexander Dugin's writings exclusively in English. Yes, we pretty much have new articles every day. So yeah, check it out. It's great. Lots of people love it. I think you'll love it too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Constantine. I can't wait to have you on again. And until next time, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.